They were already running. Not the way children run when they are chasing something fun. The way children run when they have made a decision that their small bodies are more committed to than their minds have fully caught up with. A boy and a girl, 6 years old, hand in hand, moving through the main lobby of the most expensive hotel in Seoul like they had a destination, so certain it did not require discussion. The girl slightly ahead, the boy keeping up, neither of them looking back. The lobby was full, marble floors, ambient light calibrated to make wealth feel effortless. Guests who paid enough per night to not have to think about anything moving through the space, the way expensive guests move slowly, confidently, with the specific ease of people for whom this kind of room is not remarkable. And through all of it, cutting a line that no one who saw them would have been able to explain, 2 children were running toward the man who had just walked through the front entrance. He was Korean, tailored, the kind of physical stillness that is not the absence of movement but the management of it, every gesture rationed, every shift of weight a choice. He came through the entrance with 2 men behind him and the particular quality of a person who does not adjust himself to rooms. Rooms adjust to him. He had almost cleared the entrance when the girl hit the edge of his peripheral vision, and he stopped mid-step the way you stop when something has already happened before you understood it was happening. She ran straight to him, 6 years old, no hesitation, no fear. She grabbed 3 of his fingers with her whole hand and held on and looked up at him, and then she did not say anything for a full beat. She just held on, like she had been waiting to hold on, like she had crossed 40 feet of lobby with the certainty of a person collecting something that was always theirs. His name was Han Jun-seo, and hers was Deja, and they had never met. That is where this story begins, not at the end of it, not at the explanation. Right here in the lobby, in the grip, in the moment a 6-year-old girl looked up at a man she had never seen and recognized something in him that the adults in her life had spent 6 years making sure she would never have the chance to find. Her brother Devin stopped 1 step behind her, quieter in his body, watching Han's face with the focused attention of a child who processes before he speaks. His jaw was set. Han Jun-seo looked at that jaw and felt the information arrive somewhere below thought. Then Deja pointed. Not at a door, not at a location. She pointed the way a child points when she is pointing at her mother, directional, urgent, charged with everything she did not yet have language for. She pointed toward the service corridor on the far side of the lobby and said 2 words in Korean that were slightly wrong in their pronunciation, shaped by a mouth taught the language by a woman whose Korean was excellent but not native. Han Jun-seo looked at the direction she was pointing. He looked back at both of their faces. He did not pull his hand away. And now you need to know what was happening in that service corridor. Because these 2 children had not wandered into this lobby by accident, and whatever sent them running across that marble toward a stranger in a suit was not a small thing. It was 6 years of a woman named Amara Livingston building walls in the exact wrong direction. She had been working this hotel for 6 years. Waitress, 3rd floor, the most expensive hotel in Seoul, and she moved through it with the practiced invisibility of someone who had made that invisibility her entire professional and personal strategy. Amara Livingston, 31, a woman built from precision, her uniform pressed, her face neutral, every section she worked positioned with deliberate care relative to the corridors, the elevator banks, the sightlines that mattered. She knew this building the way you know something you have studied out of necessity. Every exit, every blind spot, every service door between her section and the floors she needed to maintain distance from. Tonight there was a name on the 3rd floor private dining manifest. A name she had known was a possibility for 6 years and had arranged her entire life to be prepared for, and was still not prepared for when she actually saw it printed there. Han Jun-seo. She had requested the hotel security frequency 40 minutes ago. She had checked on her children in the employee break room, Devin and Deja, 6 years old, coloring book, strict instructions, a door they were told never to open. She had gone back to her section and kept moving because that is what you do when you have built a system, and the system is the only thing standing between you and everything you are most afraid of. What she did not know was that the system had already failed. It had failed when the security desk radioed about an unscheduled guest in the lobby who was not on any reservation list. It had failed when she stepped into the hallway outside the break room to take that call in a voice. She kept low and controlled, and still somehow did not keep low enough. Because Deja was on the other side of that door, and Deja had been reading her mother's controlled voice, since she was old enough to understand that controlled meant something was wrong. By the time Amara understood that Tarik Simmons was in this building, her children were already through the door she had told them never to open. And they were already running. Here is the question the lobby does not answer yet. Deja walked up to a man she had never seen in a lobby full of strangers, and she was not afraid, and she did not look lost, and she held on without asking permission. 6 years old. A child who had never been told his name, never been shown his face, never been given a single piece of information about the man her mother had spent 6 years building careful invisible walls to keep at a distance. So why did she know? Sit with that. We are going to come back to it. But right now Han Jun-seo is still holding 3 fingers in a child's grip, looking at a service corridor door, and on the other side of that door, something is already happening that these children came through this lobby to stop. Let me tell you what Deja heard. Amara had been on the phone in the hallway outside the break room, voice low, managed, speaking in the register she used when she was afraid and needed the afraid to stay invisible. Deja knew that register. She had been cataloging it her entire life, the specific frequency of her mother's voice when something was wrong, and her mother had decided that the wrong needed to be carried alone. She had heard it before, not often, but enough that her body had learned what it meant before her mind had the language for it. She did not open the door and tell Devin. She looked at him and he looked back at her, and they both already knew. That is what 6 years of paying close attention to a careful woman builds into the children she is trying to protect. They do not wait to be told. They have learned that waiting to be told means the wrong gets carried alone until it becomes too heavy. Deja took Devin's hand. They went through the door. The service corridor was institutional, fluorescent, the hidden side of luxury that luxury requires but does not advertise. They moved through it with the certainty of children who live partially in the world of adults and have learned which doors lead where by watching their mother navigate them. The sound of the lobby reached them through a secondary door near the east corridor, and Deja pushed through it, and they were standing at the edge of all that marble and light and expensive, indifferent sound. She scanned the room. She had her mother's eyes, that specific quality of looking at a space and sorting it before fully entering it. She was 6 years old, and she was doing exactly what Amara did every time she walked onto a floor. And then she found him, 40 feet away, standing with 2 men whose body language communicated clearly that this was not a casual conversation and not a finished one. Korean. Still. The kind of person a room reorganizes itself around without being instructed to. She stopped. Devin stopped with her. She looked at him for a full beat. Something settled in her face, not recognition exactly because she had never seen him, had no image to match. Something else. A frequency she had been carrying her whole life without a source, suddenly finding its source. Children find what their parents keep alive. Amara had never said his name inside that break room. She had kept him alive in every other possible way. In the hotel she chose, in the city she stayed in the way her hands sometimes stopped over what she was doing for no reason she ever explained. Deja had been feeling that frequency her whole life. She had just never had a direction to point it. She started walking. Devin kept up. And here is what the security footage would show if anyone ever looked at it. 2 small children crossing 40 feet of 5-star lobby without a single moment of hesitation. No looking around. No slowing down. Going somewhere already decided. Han felt the movement at his left side before he registered what it was. He looked down. Dark skin, natural hair, his own eyes in a face that had not yet finished telling him what it meant. A boy 1 step behind, his own jaw in miniature, watching with a stillness that was eerily familiar because it was inherited. The girl's hand closed around 3 of his fingers and she held on. 1 full beat of silence. She just held on. Then she pointed at the service corridor, said 2 words in slightly imperfect Korean, and looked up at him with the expression of a child who has come to collect something. Han Jun-seo looked at the direction she was pointing. Then he looked back at both of their faces. Really looked. The kind of look that a man who processes information for a living deploys when the information is demanding to be processed regardless of whether he is ready. His own face in two smaller versions. His jaw. His eyes. The specific set of the boy's mouth that Han had seen in photographs of himself at 6 years old in a house in a part of Seoul he had not thought about in years. He did not pull his hand away. His composure was professional armor, and it had never had occasion to fail quietly before. It had failed loudly, once or twice, in circumstances that were at least legible to him. This was not loud. This was a crack that started somewhere below the surface and did not announce itself. The two men behind him had gone completely still. They were reading the situation with the accuracy of people whose job required them to read their employer's situations before being told what to do about them. Han looked at the service corridor door. He looked at the children. He moved. If you came into this story believing that Han Jun-seo was the danger Amara spent 6 years building walls against, I need you to hold on to that belief for just another few minutes. I need you to feel how certain it seemed. Because the story you think you are watching right now is not the full story, and the person you think you understand is not the full person. But first, are you on Deja's side already? Because that child walked across a lobby and grabbed the hand of a man she had never met like she was collecting something that was always hers. And if that did not split your chest a little, I need to know how you are built. Drop it in the comments. We're going right back in. The service corridor, outside the break room. Amara and Tarik. 6 feet of fluorescent air between them and his body in the corridor, arranged the way his body always arranged itself in confined spaces, not threatening in any visible way. Just present in a way that required her to calculate her exits. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, controlled. The voice she used when she was managing something and needed the something to not know it was being managed. "You're not supposed to be working." He said it the way he said most things, as though the version of reality he preferred had already been agreed upon. "We had a conversation about this. I have a shift, Tarik. You have children, who are 2 floors down in a locked room," she looked at him steadily, "which you are not supposed to know." The smile came then, the kind that had never reached his eyes in 3 years of marriage and was not reaching them now. "Han Jun-seo is upstairs." She kept her face still. It was the hardest thing she had ever done with her face in a building full of things that had required her to keep her face still. "I am aware of my guest roster." "He is not your guest." The control in his voice shifted then, moved toward something underneath it that she had spent 3 years learning to measure. 6 years, Amara. You think I don't know why we are in this city? Why this hotel? You have been 50 feet away from that man for 6 years, and I have been patient because I thought. You let me, she said it quietly. The way she said things when she had crossed a line she had been approaching for a long time and could not find a reason to step back from. Say it again. I want to hear it one more time. Something moved in his eyes, a recalibration. He had misjudged her position in this hallway, and she could see him understanding that. He took one step toward her. The service door opened. 4 things happened to Amara Livingston's face in the next 2 seconds, and all 4 were involuntary. Recognition, because she had spent 6 years mapping his proximity without ever allowing direct contact, and her body knew him before her mind issued any instruction. Terror, because he was here, inside the one space she had decided was her controlled distance, which meant every wall she had built between his world and her children had just stopped existing. Relief, faster than she could intercept it, faster than 6 years of practice should have allowed. Something in her body responding to his presence with an accuracy she had never successfully argued into silence. And then the thing beneath the relief. The feeling she had been calling by wrong names for 6 years. A woman who had organized her entire life around not being in the same room as this feeling, suddenly standing directly inside it. Han Jun-seo came through the door with her daughter's hand, still in his and her son, 1 step behind him, and he looked at Tarik Simmons with the particular quality of a man who has already reached a conclusion and is simply waiting for the situation to confirm it. Deja had not let go. Amara looked at her daughter's hand, wrapped around 3 of his fingers, and something in her chest broke open in a way she did not have time to examine because the corridor was still happening. "Who are you?" Han said, Korean, flat, not a question. Tarik answered in English, which told you something about Tarik. Her husband. Han's eyes moved to Amara. One beat. Not accusation. Inventory. She could not speak. In the silence, Deja tugged on Han's hand and pointed at Tarik with the same directness she had used in the lobby, and the expression on her face was the expression of a child who has made a judgment and is waiting for the adults to catch up with it. Devin, standing 1 step behind, looked between Tarik and Han with the focused stillness of a boy who processes before he speaks. Then he stepped slightly to the right, toward Han, not dramatic, barely visible, but Amara saw it. She saw her son, 6 years old, make a choice about which side of a hallway he was on. Here is the thing Amara understood in that moment that she had been refusing to understand for 6 years. She had told herself she stayed in Seoul to monitor a threat. She had told herself the hotel was professional convenience. She had told herself the security frequency and the sightlines and the careful invisible architecture were all about survival. And some of it was. It was also something else. She had kept him in her peripheral because she had never been able to fully put him in the past. Her children had just walked across a lobby and found the direction of something she had kept alive in herself without ever allowing it to move. She had made them invisible to keep them safe, and they had walked straight into the only room she could not make invisible. "Get out," Han said, one additional word in English. "Now." Tarik Simmons was a man who had spent years reading situations and positioning himself advantageously within them. He read this one with total accuracy. What was standing in this corridor in front of him was not a complication he could manage. He found the exit with his eyes before the rest of him committed to it. He left without another word. Not gone. Tarik Simmons does not end in a service corridor. But he left. And the hallway went quiet, and Amara Livingston was standing in it with the man she had spent 6 years keeping at a careful distance and 2 children who had just made every piece of that distance irrelevant. "You kept them from me," Han said. Not an accusation. Something worse, an observation from a man still inside the moment of understanding what it cost. Devin looked up at his mother, then at Han. Then back at his mother with the directness of a 6-year-old who has not yet learned that some truths are supposed to stay internal. "He looks like us," Devin said. The corridor had no answer for that. Neither did Amara. Neither did Han Jun-seo, who looked at the boy when he said it and something moved behind his eyes that was not the careful professional stillness he had worn since he stepped through that door. Something that did not have a name yet because it was too new. The break room, a door that closed, a table and 4 chairs and the coloring book still open from before everything changed. The twins at the table between them, watching, not coloring, watching with the attentiveness of 2 small people who understood they were inside something significant even without the word for it. Han Jun-seo sat across from Amara. She spoke first because waiting for him felt like a surrender she was not able to afford. "When I found out I was pregnant," she said, "Tarik had already been in my life for 2 months. He knew who you were. He knew your name. He told me that if I tried to reach you, if I tried to go back, he had information about your organization that he would use." She stopped, reorganized. "I did not know if it was real. I still don't know. But I was 25 and I was pregnant and afraid and he was standing between me and every option that felt survivable. So I disappeared. I chose the cage that came with fewer immediate consequences, and I told myself when the children were older. You would find a way out, Han said. Yes. And did you find one? The silence answered that. He knew, Han said. All this time he knew they were mine. He suspected, from the beginning, that has been the leverage, not what he would do to you, what he would do to me to them if I tried to leave. She looked at the table, then back at him because she owed him the direct thing even when it cost her. I made the wrong calculation. I have known for a long time that I made the wrong calculation, but knowing does not always give you the mechanism to undo it. Han Jun-seo looked at his hands on the table, then at Devin, then at Deja, who was looking back at him with the steady assessment of a child who has already finished deciding and is waiting for the world to arrive at the same place. He looked at her for a long time. The crack from the lobby had not closed. It was not going to close. 6 years. He had spent 2 of them looking. Then he had decided she left because she wanted to, and he had made a kind of peace with that, the way you make peace with things by putting them somewhere internal where they cannot be examined too closely. He had not known there was a different answer. He had not been allowed to know. A man had stood between him and the truth of 6 years, and used a woman's fear to keep it there, and the 6 years were gone, and his children had grown 2 years of memory and vocabulary and preferences and fears, and the particular way Deja's face went still before she decided something, all of it happened without him. Not because he let it, because it was taken. "I need you to tell me everything Tarik has," he said carefully. "Everything he knows, everything he has said he will do, not for tonight. Tonight is handled, for what comes after." Amara looked at him across the table. The part of her that had spent 6 years calibrating threats understood exactly the texture of what he was offering. Not rescue, not absolution. 2 people who had been on opposite sides of a secret now standing on the same side of it, with Tarik Simmons as a shared problem instead of a private cage. "And them," she said. "What do you want from this from them?" Han looked at the twins. Something moved across his face that had never had occasion to be there before, and so had no practiced shape. It was new, and it was enormous, and it was sitting on him visibly in a way that almost nothing ever sat on him visibly. "That is not a question I can answer in a break room at the end of a shift with 30 minutes of information." He looked back at her. "But I am going to need time to understand what I am looking at, what they need, what that requires of me." A pause. "I am telling you that so you do not disappear again." Both a warning and the most careful honesty anyone had offered her in years. Amara Livingston had been careful for 6 years. Invisible. Safe in the way that careful and invisible produce safe when safe is the only goal you allow yourself to have. Tonight all 3 of those things failed at the same time, and she was sitting in a break room with Han Junseo across from her and her children between them, and the unfamiliar feeling of air that is not inside a structure she built. The twins fell asleep the way children do, Devon first, head on the table, then Deja 5 minutes later with her head on her brother's shoulder. They had stayed awake long enough to confirm the room was stable. Then they let go. Children trust faster than adults because they have not yet accumulated the specific collection of reasons not to. "I looked for you," Han said, quieter now, the precision still there but without the management of a corridor behind it. 2 years, I had people looking." He let the beat sit. "And then I decided you left because you wanted to, that the choice had been made." His eyes found hers. "I need you to tell me which one of us was wrong." 6 years restructured in her chest. Not the version she had been carrying, the version where she was a woman who ran from something she was afraid of. The version underneath it. The one she had never let herself look at directly because looking at it required admitting that what she ran from was something she also wanted. Completely. In ways that had frightened her at 25 and would have frightened her at 31 if she had ever given herself permission to feel them. She looked at Deja sleeping with her head on her brother's shoulder, at the hand that had crossed 40 feet of marble lobby and held on without asking permission. She thought about what that walk had cost a 6-year-old, not courage. Something simpler and larger than courage. The complete absence of the fear that had paralyzed every adult in this story. The certainty that the feeling was allowed. "I made you invisible to keep you safe," she thought, "and you walked straight into the only room I couldn't make invisible." "I was wrong," she said. "It was more complicated than wrong, but yes." The room held that. Han looked at the coloring book open on the table. The half-finished drawings, a house in blue crayon, a figure in red that might have been a person or the idea of one. He looked at them for a long time. "I don't know what this looks like," he said. "What you would need it to look like, what is possible given—" He did not finish. Did not need to. Some sentences are too large for their own endings. "Neither do I." He stood, looked at the twins once more with the expression that had no name because it had never had occasion to exist on his face before. Then he looked at her and said, "Tarik is still in this city, which means you are not safe in this building or anywhere else until the situation is handled. I need you to understand the situation will be handled. He paused. I also need you to understand that when I say that, I am not talking about you. I am talking about him. The difference between those two things was the whole conversation, the one that was going to take longer than tonight. He moved to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame, did not turn around. The girl, he said. She walked up to me like she already knew. She did, Amara said. A beat. She gets that from you. He left. The door closed softly. Amara sat in the break room with her sleeping children and the open coloring book, and the specific, enormous feeling of a woman standing at the beginning of something she has been refusing to begin for 6 years, understanding finally that the refusal never worked. It only delayed the moment when 2 children with her eyes and his jaw would make the choice she never let herself make. That feeling does not have a clean name. It sits between the thing you lost and the thing you are about to have to learn how to want. She is going to have to figure it out. So is he. And Tarik Simmons is still in the city, which means we are nowhere near done. If that corridor cracked something in your chest, hit like and subscribe because part 2 is where Han Jun-seo starts dealing with 6 years of missing time, and that man does not process loss quietly. Drop in the comments. Are you giving Amara grace, or do you think she has a lot to answer for? Because that comment section is going to be divided, and I want to know exactly which side you are on before part 2 changes everything you think you know about why she stayed.